The United States and Israel have begun a war against Iran together, and the so-called Mission Epic Fury had no lesser goal than to completely eliminate Iran's entire military, as well as the country's leadership. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, Iran's supreme leader and highest authority, has already been killed in a spectacular operation that was, from a military strategic point of view, completely unique. In fact, the entire operation marked a completely new way of waging war, with tactics that had never been used like this before. And those exact methods, the absolutely futuristic technologies behind them, and everything that has happened so far, we're going to show you now. It all begins very early in the morning, and in no fewer than 4 completely different places. First, on the U.S. aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln, which is positioned right here in the Arabian Sea, together with other U.S. escort ships. From these ships, a whole series of weapons are about to be launched toward Iran, starting with the so-called Tomahawk cruise missiles, a type of guided missile that weighs over a ton and can cover unbelievable distances of more than 2,000 kilometers. A whole series of these Tomahawks are fired off in the morning and then fly toward Iran. The next key location is not in the Arabian Sea, but in the Mediterranean. The U.S. aircraft carrier USS Gerald Ford had been positioned there. Several Tomahawk cruise missiles were also launched from it toward Iran. Alongside these 2 maritime locations, there were also 2 important land-based launch sites where several aircraft and weapons would be sent toward Iran, namely in Israel, more precisely at the Nevatim military base. The legendary F-35 fighter jets were positioned there, heading for Iran, and the United States is also sending the first F-35 fighter jets from its US base in Jordan, also heading toward Iran. A few F-18 fighter jets escort them as well. With that, the first wave of attacks on Iran has officially begun. And right here, militarily speaking, a masterful chess move is unfolding, because the missiles and jets launch from 4 different locations at different times, only to arrive in Iran at exactly the same moment. This is also called time on target. In other words, you coordinate the launches of missiles and jets so that they all arrive at the same place at the same time, because what that creates is a barrage you can't defend against fast enough. But the missiles can't simply fly straight toward Iran, because Iran is secured like a fortress. There are radars everywhere on the ground, and the entire airspace is monitored extremely strictly. Iran was already attacked last year by Israel and the United States, and the regime knows that new attacks can begin at any time. That is exactly why the Tomahawk missiles and the F-35 fighter jets don't just head directly for Iran, but follow very specific instructions. The Tomahawk missiles do something very unusual, for example. They fly at about 880 kilometers per hour, which isn't slow, but it's below the speed of sound. So in principle, they would be an easy target for Iran's air defenses. But the Americans use a trick. They don't fly the missiles high, they fly them extremely low. Because at high altitude, they would be visible from several hundred kilometers away, but at very low altitude, they remain almost invisible to radar because of the curvature of the Earth. And that is exactly the effect the Americans took advantage of. It was now around 6 o'clock in the morning, and while the Tomahawk missiles were still flying over the sea and slowly approaching the coast, the much faster F-35 fighter jets were already entering Iranian airspace. The F-35 jets can fly an unbelievable 1,900 kilometers per hour, which makes them supersonic aircraft. But just because you're flying faster than the speed of sound doesn't mean you're invisible to radar. Still, the jets used a route that functioned like a blind spot. They flew through corridors that Iran barely guarded, and that's how they could race toward their target. But why did they go completely unnoticed? Well, this is where we get to the sci-fi part of the whole mission, because the United States and Israel relied on technology that was miles ahead of this of Iran: space-based electronic warfare. With the help of their own spy satellites, the United States was able to detect Iranian radar systems days before the attack. But not just detect them in the sense of seeing them in pictures. They could literally determine the exact electromagnetic emissions and then know which frequencies the Iranians would use to search for enemy aircraft. And not only that. With knowledge of Iran's exact frequencies, the Americans could deliberately send their own jamming frequencies toward Iran's radar systems. But the US military used an even crazier method to confuse Iran's radars. The whole thing almost looked like something out of a silly cartoon. But in fact, the United States relied on a kind of fake aircraft squadron because the so-called ADM-MALDs are small decoy drones, not even 3 meters long, that have what is known as an SAS. The SAS is a system that can be read by ground-based radar and tells the radar what kind of aircraft it is supposedly seeing. And so countless small, cheap drones tricked the Iranians into thinking they were actually huge military aircraft flying over Iran in a gigantic formation. And this swarm of drones was then shot down by Iranian missiles, while the F-35 fighter jets were able to keep flying completely undisturbed. Within minutes, Iran fired dozens of its most valuable interceptor missiles at the decoys and quickly ran out of interceptors. Now the moment everyone has been working toward begins. In just a few seconds, Israel and the United States will jointly destroy Iran's most important targets. It will all happen so fast that Iran will have hardly any options to respond. The F-35 jets are now approaching Tehran, the capital of Iran and the seat of Ayatollah Khamenei, the leader of Iran. Meanwhile, the Tomahawk missiles are racing toward Iran's coast, and the impacts begin. Even though they flew extremely low the entire time, they suddenly shoot steeply upward, only to then dive down from above with force onto radar installations and antenna systems along the coast, blowing them apart almost in sync. It happens incredibly fast, and Iran's radar systems start dropping out one after another. At the exact moment the Tomahawks hit Iran's coastal radars and antennas, the F-35 jets are over Tehran, directly above the government district. They release their small GBU bombs and guide them straight toward the building complex of Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei. The GBU bombs are extremely precise, and even though they carry relatively little explosive power, they can glide in with near-surgical accuracy, hitting specific parts of a building. This allowed Khamenei's building to be destroyed while the street next door was barely damaged. The first wave was over, and it was a complete success. Khamenei was killed in the attack. Iran's radars had been deceived, and besides the F-35 fighter jets, a whole range of other military aircraft were now in Iranian airspace. Only a short time after the first wave, the second wave of attacks began. Little by little, B-2 Spirit stealth bombers suddenly appeared. The B-2 Spirit doesn't just look threatening, it is also one of the few aircraft that, in theory, can carry and drop a thermonuclear bomb weighing more than 1 ton. Over Iran, they are not carrying an atomic bomb, but the GBU-57 they are carrying is, at an unbelievable 13 tons, the heaviest non-nuclear bomb in the United States. It has 2,400 kilograms of explosives on board and can be guided very precisely. Within half an hour of the F-35 jet attacks, the stealth bombers now drop several of the GBU-57 bombs on Iran. But they do it very selectively because these gigantic bombs are designed for exactly this, to penetrate deep into the ground, because that is where so-called missile cities are located, deep under the earth. They are essentially the heart of Iran's military because in these underground facilities, some of them built into mountains, Iran stores its most important missiles and other decisive military equipment. To prevent Iran from using that infrastructure, the B-2 bombers strike these facilities with great precision. One GBU bomb first destroys the surface, and a second plunges deep into the hole, then uses its massive explosive force to completely destroy the underground facility. But as you've noticed, the attack on Iran still isn't over. It is still continuing even now, several days after the first strike. And even after the destruction of Khamenei's headquarters, the radars and antennas, and the country's most important missile silos, Israel and the United States continue their wave of attacks. More than 1,000 targets across the country were attacked in the hours after the first strike. Various important military bases and airfields, multiple weapons depots, meeting places of the country's top leaders, and also some civilian buildings, like a girls' school in the south of the country, where 165 people died in the attack. And Iran struck back quickly as well. Not only was Israel attacked, but some US bases in neighboring Gulf states were also attacked by Iran. Donald Trump already declared that this is only the beginning, and the biggest waves of attacks are still to come. Which is why we now want to ask you, what is your opinion on this war in Iran? Can you understand America's decision to follow Israel into the war? Let us know your thoughts on this conflict in the comments, and we'll see you next time.